and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house, and you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. As the days go by and the...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special spoiler podcast on the Comics Kid 2099's channel. I am not the Comics Kid 2099. My name is Connor Nielsen. I'm one of the co-hosts, but joining me is the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
I am doing very well. I am the Comics Kid 2099. Normally, you and I, we talk about Twin Peaks, and we talk about things with people from Twin Peaks, but sometimes we talk about new releases, and there haven't been a whole lot that you and I have talked about lately, but then on Disney Plus last week, we had the finale to WandaVision finished airing, and so we're here to talk about that. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before you wanted me to jump into that?
No, I was going to say right off the bat, before we even talk about the plot synopsis, I'm very curious to know how this is going to turn out, because usually we talk about a movie, or we talk about an episode or a collection of episodes of a show, but we have never talked about an entire season of television before. This might be a shorter episode or season episode-wise and time-wise than like a sitcom or miniseries or what have you. But I am very curious to know how this is going to turn out. But why don't you talk about WandaVision, the kickoff to Marvel's fourth phase and the 24th installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Okay. WandaVision is a television show that exists. Connor, why don't you... No, I'm just kidding. That might show my hand a little bit, but in all seriousness, if you have seen any of the Marvel Studios superhero movies, Wanda Maximoff was in the Avengers movies, and the Vision was in those movies as well. And then spoilers for those movies, but the Vision gets killed twice in Avengers Infinity War, and then Wanda disappears along with half the population of the universe at the end of that movie. And then at the end of Avengers Endgame, which is set 5 years later, Wanda is brought back to life, but the Vision is still dead. And so this series picks up after the events of Avengers Endgame. At first, you don't know what is going on here, but Wanda is living an idyllic family life with Vision. This is a 9-episode series, and each episode is kind of capturing the feel of a certain era or a certain specific sitcom. So the first episode is the 1950s, the second one is the 60s, so forth. And then you are slowly, along with some of the other characters in the show, figuring out what is going on and specifically why it's going on. And so that is the best that I can say without spoiling anything, but this is going to be a spoiler podcast, so from here on, you have been warned, spoilers about this series. I want to say, Connor, you and I probably had a very different approach to this show, because I watched the first 2 episodes the Friday that they dropped, and then I did a video saying that I was not impressed, and then I remember you saying that you liked it quite a bit more than I did, and then I didn't watch any of it until last week when the first 8 episodes were already out, and I went ahead and burned through episodes 3 through 8 in a week, but then I watched episode 9 yesterday, and so I'm assuming that you were keeping up with it as it was going. Is that correct?
Yes, these Disney Plus shows air on Fridays, and my roommates and I, we all watch them together on Friday nights.
Okay, and I'm curious also, because like you said, we've never done an entire season before. The most we've ever done is, roughly 2 hours of material, either a movie or earlier this week, the Sex and the City podcast went up, and we talked about 4 episodes of that back to back. This is 9 episodes. Some of them are only about 20 minutes long when you take away like the 10 minutes of credits, and then some of them are like 35 minutes long when you take away credits. So it averages out to about 5 hours of material, if I had to guess. So this is going to be a lot bigger than some of the other stuff we've talked about. But also, I don't have a whole lot to say about like the first half of the season. You might have a little bit more to say about each individual episode, but it is going to be interesting getting into this. And also, I'm curious what your thoughts were, because you and I haven't discussed this beyond those first 2 episodes that I did a video on. You kind of talked about it a little bit with me off air. So I am curious, overall, what did you think of this season?
This was an interesting viewing experience. Firstly, it cemented my great disdain for speculation culture. Because it is quick rush to watch the new episode so nothing gets spoiled for you, and then you watch it, and then the second you finish watching it, everybody wants to start speculating about what everything means, and I don't really have much of an interest in that. That being said, my only 2 predictions came true, and they turned out to be correct, and I felt very vindicated in that. But I don't know, I would get inundated with like videos and suggestions, and I would get inundated with like a bunch of people's theories on like message boards and stuff, and I was like, I mean, look, after The Dark Knight Rises, the whole idea of speculating kind of got ruined for me. First of all, I just wanted to say I really wish this all dropped at once, just for the sake of that. On the one hand, I do like that I had a week to digest everything. There's always something to look forward to, but there was like a weird stress attached to making sure I watched this. Like, it would be like in the middle, like it would be like noon on a Friday, and there would already be a bunch of like videos of WandaVision, what does this mean, Red Arrow kind of videos, and I was like, oh man, I guess I just can't be on YouTube, or I can't be on Discord, or I can't be on anything until I watch this episode. And it's like, that's crazy though, right? Like, these drop on like Fridays for me at like midnight, and for the rest of like, for people in New York, it's 3 a.m. before they can finally see this. And it's like, when is somebody supposed to watch this before they get inundated with all of those like people who make videos for a living and who wake up at like 8 a.m. and then just watch an episode really quickly and then spend a few hours, anyways, that's kind of outside of the show, but that was one huge factor around my viewing experience of the show, was the weird speculation stress, because I'm not speculating very much on it, but a lot of other people are, and they could potentially ruin it for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And I also, I kind of prefer the old Netflix model, which seems to be where all of this is getting away from that. But, like Netflix shows, like, Marvel had several of the Netflix shows, and with Daredevil, you would get 13 episodes all at once. And some people felt the need to watch all 13 in one sitting, and that sounded absolutely psychotic to me. There was no way you could not pay me enough money to watch 13 hours all at once. But what I could do is watch 2 episodes, and then the next day watch 2 episodes, and then in a week I'll have it finished. And I've never liked the the old TV model, is what I call it, where it's like your favorite TV show comes on Tuesday at 8 o'clock or whatever, and you have to bend your schedule around that. And then a week later, you've probably forgotten a lot of the important stuff that happened. Or, if it's a regular-sized season, then it might be 15 weeks later when something comes up, and it's like, hey, remember that thing from episode 5? Well, no, I don't. That was like 3 or 4 months ago. But you have to remember all that stuff, even though the show is coming out weekly. And with WandaVision, that's not quite as big of a problem, because it's only 9 episodes for this season, and I watched most of it, within a week. But some people may not want to, I don't want to say this isn't important, but like if you've got other stuff on your mind, like paying your taxes and stress from work and your personal life, like I've got to take the kids to the soccer game, you're not going to be thinking about, I wonder what that book was in the basement or something like that. And so, so like this, watching a show weekly is not going to have, it's not going to be ever present in your mind. Whereas if you get all the episodes at once, you can watch it at your pace. You can watch it at your leisure. And I personally don't have to have weekly content. And that seems to be the direction we're going, where we're going to have a week-long break, and then we're going to get into Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then after that show drops, finishes, we'll have another week of silence, and then we'll get the Loki show, or maybe What If show, I don't remember. And so, like, it seems like we're moving into the direction of constantly, here's stuff in your face. And like you said, this is designed to get people talking. And so, like, people are going to be theorizing and creating theories, and some of that can be fun to a point, but then for someone who doesn't want to like for you probably don't want to wake up in the morning and you've still got sleep in your eyes and you've got bedhead and okay, I guess I got to go watch WandaVision now before it gets ruined for me, or else I have to like throw my phone outside so that I don't accidentally see something. And not everyone wants to build their life around that. And like if you work on Fridays, I hope you don't have any coworkers who watched it before you did and might accidentally spoil something. Even if you're like, you're over here and your coworker's over there talking to your other coworker and you accidentally hear something huge, and then, well, crap, I was going to watch that later tonight and kind of wind down from a rough week at work. And so I'm with you. I think that a lot of people built up expectations of what was going to happen, and I was not building any theories at all. I was talking with a friend of mine who he was actually much more on board with this than I was. He was the one who was telling me I should get back into it. I told him I watched the first 2 episodes and I was not interested in it anymore. And then he told me that it gets better and that I should give it another shot. And he had all sorts of theories that he had. And so talking with him, I was kind of getting caught up in it. Even though I wasn't actively coming up with theories on my own, I was hearing other people's theories. And some of it I was like, I don't know if I like that. And some of it I was like, ooh, that would be really cool if they did that. And then they don't do it. And I actually I didn't click on the article, but I saw an article where it said Matt Shackman, he's the guy the showrunner of the show, he said like, well, people are going to be disappointed because their theories don't line up. And some of that is just people coming up with wild and crazy theories. Like I saw someone who said the show is going to end with Mark Hamill is going to be cast as Magneto, and he's going to come in and say, I am your father. And on the one hand, I was like, no, Mark Hamill is not even my 10th choice to play Magneto. But on the other hand, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, I really like that. And I was like, I want that. I really want that. And then, spoilers, you don't get Mark Hamill as Magneto. And so, like, that's something that nothing the show does suggests that Magneto is actually going to show up. Now, that's a pretty solid theory because Magneto is connected to Scarlet Witch in the comics. So people are thinking, like, well, spoilers, at some point Quicksilver shows up here, so who's to say Magneto won't as well? And so, like, that's not the most outlandish theory, but also the show isn't doing anything to lead fans on with that theory. But then you have cast Evan Peters to reprise his role as Quicksilver. You are leading fans to believe that you are, like, connecting this to the Fox X-Men movies. And, like, Disney now owns the X-Men, and they have the rights to the X-Men, so is this going to be their weird and wacky way of introducing the X-Men into the MCU? Is Wanda going to do a reverse House of M, and she's going to, like, pull X-Men from different timelines and say, you're here, and that's how we're going to get Deadpool 3? And, whenever we see Evan Peters show up, and previously it was a different actor, it was Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yes,
Aaron Taylor Johnson. He was playing Quicksilver in Age of Ultron, and now we've got a Quicksilver from a different timeline. So it's understandable that people are making theories that, okay, Quicksilver's here. How is this happening? Is this, was he pulled here in between Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse? Or, is this a different guy? And so then that all culminates in a boner joke. And, okay, you can't be too upset with fans for coming up with theories when you were part of the problem. He had that article saying, oh, fans are going to be upset. Yeah, I wonder why. Because you are making them think that something is going to happen, and then you pull the rug out from under them.
Yeah, so I guess I should generally say, just like because I didn't really get into like my broad feelings. I was just kind of talking about the speculation culture.
Yeah.
I guess I had like one last thing to say about the speculation culture kind of thing. I kind of forgot about it, but the point is, like, when it comes to this whole thing, I am very much of the opinion that I will just see what happens. Mm-hmm. I hear somebody go, "Oh, well, this could happen," and I'm think that's right, that could happen. I can just wait a week to see if that happens or not. And because of just kind of my own, like, there's a part of me that's still the contrarian teenager, where I remember there was, like, towards the end of the show, there was a close-up of a book in a basement. Like, you had mentioned this earlier. Mm-hmm. And I saw, like, somebody was just making a big deal out of, what's this book? What's this book? This book's got to be important. And I thought, well, okay, like, we can just wait a couple of weeks to see if it's important. Like, yeah. It's not that big of a deal. Why are you making this a big deal? It got a close-up. And so then all of a sudden there's a big reveal with that in the final episode. And like, there you go. It was 2 seconds. They said the word Darkhold.
Mm-hmm.
And that person's probably going, I knew it. And I'm like, okay, fine. It's just a book. It's a thing from the comics. I got it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it amounted to just, all that amounted to was a reference, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Darkhold, the Book of the Damned. That's literally what the dialogue we're dealing with at the end. But I will just say, broadly speaking, now that I put that to bed, I liked this show. I loved it when it was starting. I loved the feeling of mystery that it was really kind of doing, and because of how I was able to read into the like the sitcom stuff was kind of hacky and kind of like very authentic pastiche of a bunch of sitcoms I've never really watched. But I was able to kind of like, I found that all charming. I found the lame jokes endearing. I liked the style of it a lot because I knew that what I was watching was some kind of expression that's being manifested by Wanda. And I was like, oh, I get what they're doing. And I remember when they first announced their slate of films and television post Spider-Man Far From Home, I remember thinking that this was my most anticipated of their television shows, because if they do what I want them to do, it would be awesome. And I will say the first 3 episodes of this show are that thing where you have these sort of like pastiche sitcom stuff, and all that stuff kind of, you don't really know what's going on because it's like you're watching a hacky sitcom, but you know there has to be something going on underneath it all. And because of like, you know, the stuff Wanda's lost in the past, and like how, I don't know, like I wrote, for example, I've recently finished a screenplay that's kind of about dealing with negative experiences through an appreciation of like TV and movies. In my screenplay, it was mostly movies, and I thought that like this was doing something similar. Not to say I have like a monopoly on that idea. Plenty of films and television have done that, but it seemed to me like it was a television show that was about TV and how TV is usually used as a tool of escapism, and how like our yearnings, like how escapism sort of like it informs our ideas of and our desires of how the real world should be. And so if you've experienced a lot of loss and a lot of trauma, and you have, say, reality warping powers, I think living out this sort of like false television reality was a cool way of dealing with that. And I remember you and I were talking off mic, and you know, you had said that like you had heard people saying it's a show about trauma, and you were like, yes, I know it's a show about trauma, but every single one of these heroes has lost somebody and has dealt with trauma. And I get what you're saying, and I get where you're coming from, but for me it was kind of neat because it was like I like the show because it was dealing with Wanda's unique way of dealing with trauma. And I thought that was really clever and fun, and the genre pastiche was on point. Then Sword shows up, and Sword might just be the worst thing the Marvel Cinematic Universe has manifested into existence. I hated this thing. And everything that honestly had to deal with Sword, like, fundamentally broke this show for me. And I am so happy, though, that I think the stuff with Wanda and Vision and all the stuff that is happening within the Hex is so strong, because, like, it's so strong that anytime the Sword clowns intersect with the primary cast of like Wanda and Vision and whatnot, they immediately get better and not intolerable. I'll give Monica a slight, like, she's slightly out of my firing range. There's a couple of times where she bugged me, but mostly she was fine. But like Jimmy Woo, and especially Darcy, and like Commander Hayward, and like all of them, I just hated everything about it. And because I think they kind of showed us the other side of the curtain way too early, it kind of killed that feeling of mystery. And that feeling of mystery, it helped me feel closer to the Wanda Maximoff character. And for a lot of the middle of this show, I kind of lost sight of her. And luckily, the second to last episode is pretty darn great, because that last episode is really not that great, and my dislike of it is tempered by how good the second to last episode was. I've been going on for a little while. That's broadly my thoughts on an entire season of television.
Okay. A lot to unpack there. I think you and I have completely opposite opinions on this, because
Oh no.
episode 4 was my favorite episode of this season. I am curious what specifically you dislike about Sword, other than it takes away the mystery. Because for me, I said this when I did my video on the first 2 episodes. There was nothing in those first 2 episodes to make me want to keep watching. I don't know if you've ever watched the TV show The Good Place. I won't spoil it, but the very first episode of The Good Place, there is a jaw-dropping moment in the end of the first episode, and there's actually several jaw-dropping moments throughout that series, but the first episode has a big one that made me go, oh wow, that's pretty insane. I want to keep watching this show because of that. And for me, I did not think there was anything in the first 2 episodes that came even close to making me want to watch this. I think if you took somebody who didn't have a decade of watching and experiencing and falling in love with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you sat them in front of the TV and watched the first 2 episodes of WandaVision, they would be so bored, they wouldn't care about anything going on, and they would just want to get up and do literally anything else than watch this garbage. And I have already said, like, I have no love for Bewitched or the Honeymooners or the Dick Van Dyke Show. I don't care about that stuff. I guess I should also talk about everything else I don't care about. This is going to sound mean, but I don't especially care about Paul Bettany or Elizabeth Olsen. I don't dislike either one of them. I don't think they're bad actors. I do think Paul Bettany is a little bit of a stronger actor than Elizabeth Olsen, but I don't think either of them is bad. But I also, if you told me, hey, there's this insane high-concept sci-fi movie that's coming out next year, and it's going to star Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, I would say, oh, okay, maybe I'll see it someday. Like, I don't just have a strong affinity for those actors. And I also don't have a strong affinity for the characters of Wanda or Vision. I've never really cared about them in the comics. If they're part of a larger team that mostly consists of characters I do care about, I'll say, okay, and then we've got Wanda and Vision over here, that's fine. Or, like in the movies, they were in Age of Ultron, they were in Civil War, they were in Infinity War, and you also had other characters in that movie that I liked. But I don't think I ever would have said when Age of Ultron came out that, hey, you know what would be great if we gave these two their own story. I just don't think I would have been interested in that. And so you have actors that I don't especially care about playing characters I don't especially care about in, air quotes, wacky sitcom shenanigans that I really don't care about. So this show, it was stacked against me from the beginning. And like you were saying earlier, like, everyone like is putting on like their robe and getting out some scotch and saying, this show is about trauma, isn't it so deep and powerful? And I would say no, because literally point to anything that's not about trauma, like not just in the MCU, but like anything. Like, you know, Star Wars is about trauma, and it's also a silly movie about space wizards. Like, just saying it's about trauma is not nearly enough to make me interested. And like, also, I kind of like going to my escapist entertainment to escape from the garbage of the real world, and so I don't want to have this stuff about, I lost my husband twice and I had to kill him one of those times, and, you know, poor me, I'm gonna, you know, make everyone's life miserable in this show. Like, okay, that's not really something that works for me, but, you know, everyone else in the world loved it. And so I do think that I'm taking a long way to get to a short point, but like with The Good Place, there was that big thing at the end of the first episode where I was like, oh wow, and I kind of, you know, put my hands on my head and I'm like, my mouth is open because I'm like, that's cool, I want to watch what's next. I don't think there's anything like that in these first 2 episodes. And they aired the first 2 episodes together, and then after that it was 1 episode a week. I think they could have dropped the 1950s episode entirely and started in the 60s and then double aired the 60s and 70s together, and then at the end of that first day, where they've aired 2 episodes together, and they've thrown a character in the show, her name was Geraldine, and then later we find out it's something else, Wanda throws her out of the Hex because she knows things, and she doesn't want her in there. The Hex is this town that Wanda is controlling. I don't remember if we said that. And so I think if they had done that, I would have been a little bit more interested in the next episode. And so where you said you hated episode 4, Episode 4 was my favorite one because it didn't have any of this sitcom crap that I did not care about in the slightest. And from the very beginning to the very end, I never cared about Wanda or Vision or anything that was going on with them. I was always much more interested in the side characters. And so this entire episode didn't have your leading characters, and I was actually interested in what was going on. And in general, I'm going to say it's a bad thing if your main characters, if the episode that doesn't have your main characters in it is someone's favorite episode, that's probably not a good thing. Now, I don't know what the consensus is. I don't know if people tend to agree with you or if they tend to agree with me on that. But I really didn't like Darcy in the Thor movies. I thought she was pretty irritating in those movies, but I actually liked her better than Wanda or Vision in this show. So to me, that says how much I disliked just about everything about this show. And a lot of that could just be my personal preference. Like, why am I doing a podcast on the show if I hated it so much? But I didn't hate it eventually. Like, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm liking this more as it was getting further away from the sitcom stuff. But it looks like me and you both had just like different expectations and different preferences. So like you preferred seeing Wanda process her grief through the lens of her love of television, and that was something that just did not appeal to me in the slightest.
Yeah, we really have polar opposite opinions. This is going to be weird. Not only have we never done a full season review of television, I don't think we've ever been on opposite sides of a thing ever.
Maybe like with Twin Peaks season 3, I think you and I were pretty opposed on that.
That's true. That is true. But like, there are things in this show I like and things I dislike. Whereas I generally liked most of that season and you just hated all of it. This thing has stuff you like and dislike, but it's like the opposite things. I will say after a certain point, anytime like the aspect ratio shifted into like widescreen, I wanted to like get up and leave the room because like I almost like couldn't sit down and watch the stuff with Sword. Broadly speaking, I like Elizabeth Olsen as an actress, and I've always liked Paul Bettany. I think he's a pretty solid actor. But I've always really liked Vision since Age of Ultron, since they introduced him there. And I think that he's always been this really cool, I think, supporting player. I always like the sort of psychology, philosophy 101 conversations he has with people. I always think those are always fun when they throw them in there. And like, I don't know, like his line from Age of Ultron, like, but something is not beautiful because it lasts. Like that's been like a thing that like I've referenced several times to like throughout my life to other people. I don't know, like I really like that character, and I think Paul Bettany is stellar in the role. And I think in this show, I think it really allowed Elizabeth Olsen to, I think, finally carve out an identity for Wanda, and like I finally like really like that character, even though like in the past it's kind of relied on me. I've always thought her performance as Scarlet Witch was interesting, if not like that character doesn't exactly have a whole lot to do. But I don't know, like, so I thought like them doing this was fantastic. So can you explain to me what you like about the Sword stuff? Because I want to say I understand the function of Sword. I understand why it's here. And on paper, I like the idea of having this here. I just think the execution is like 100% terrible. And like, I can't, I don't know, like I completely lose any of my articulation when it comes to describing this because I don't like it at all.
Okay. Well, I should point out that I don't like Darcy. I don't necessarily think she's that funny. And like I said, in the Thor movies, I thought she was by far my least favorite part of both of the Thor movies. But I just really hated the sitcom stuff. I don't think I can put into words how much I hated the unfunny, haha, he thinks that something's going on, she thinks something else is going on. None of that worked for me on any level. And I can understand what you're saying about basically the show is a mystery show. And, we talked about an episode of Riptide a few months ago, and in that episode of Riptide, they tell us right up front, here's the person who did the thing, and now our characters are kind of getting caught up to something we already know. And that is a very poor way of doing a mystery. And so looking at this show, you have 9 episodes, and in episode 4, the Sword people come in, and they're like, okay, Wanda's using her powers, she's trapped this village, or, trapped this town in this barrier, and everyone inside doesn't know what's going on. And so they're telling the audience a lot of stuff that if I had to guess, you probably would have preferred a lot of that get drip fed to us slowly over the entire season, over all 9 episodes.
Yes.
And so I understand that, but also it was a break from the garbage that I hated in the show. And so, like, it's just a simple matter of I did not like what the show was doing, and it was something different. I liked Jimmy Woo in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought he was fun. I liked getting to see him here. I like Monica. I didn't think I really wasn't sure what I would think of her because I've never seen this actress Teyona Paris. I've never seen her in anything before, and I really liked what she did here. I liked her story about waking up from the snap and finding out everything she missed. I really liked all that, and so and also if I ever hear someone say that Clark Kent's disguise is stupid and people should know he's Superman, I want to point them to this show because I knew for like a year that Captain Marvel, I'm going to call her Captain Marvel because in the comics, Monica Rambeau, she's Captain Marvel sometimes, and so I'm accidentally going to call her Captain Marvel. Monica, I knew that Monica was going to be in the show for a long time. They had revealed that a long time ago. And so I knew she was going to be in it. And then in episode 2, Wanda is at this little party that some of the women in town are at, and this woman, Geraldine, is there. And I didn't know who she was. I thought, okay, she's just another woman in the town. And then in episode 3, we're now like in the 1970s era, and she comes to Wanda's house, and she's talking, and there's like, oh, isn't that hilarious? There's a stork in the background. Ha ha, it's funny, isn't it? And so Wanda's trying to like prevent Geraldine from seeing who that is or, you know, seeing any of that stuff. And then Wanda mentions she used to have a brother and he died. And the woman says, oh yeah, Ultron killed him. And so this woman knows stuff that Wanda doesn't want people in the town to know about. And so she throws her out. And then in episode 4, we find out that her name is not Geraldine, that her name is Monica Rambeau. And I knew that Monica Rambeau was going to be in the show, but because the show was giving her like a 1960s hairstyle and then a 1970s hairstyle, I didn't know that that was Monica Rambeau. I was completely thrown when they said, yeah, this is Monica. She mentions her name at a hospital, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, it took me much longer to glob onto that than it probably should have. But mostly, I just liked that we didn't have the same, like, air quotes, hilarious sitcom-y stuff, but I can very easily see from a narrative point of view that you don't want to just drop all of the exposition at once. And I do think there is some, like, issues that the show has with, like, okay, now we're going to do here's another big reveal, and then, like you, I was a little disappointed with the finale as well. So I think it's just we'll have to agree to disagree thing, but I can see why you don't like getting all of this information dropped on us in one fell swoop about halfway into the season. I can totally see that.
Yeah, and I get why you're not into the sitcom stuff. I actually, the day after I watched the first 2 episodes, I went with a group of people to go sledding. And 2 of the people I was with, they're engaged, and they had actually watched the 2 episodes earlier in the day, and they thought it was, like you, they thought it was kind of crap. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I think after those first 2 episodes, a lot of people, I heard a lot of people were not as down with it as I was, and they felt similarly to the way you felt. And you were curious because you said, I'm curious to know how, like, what the consensus will be as to, like, your side or my side or whatever. I think right now, like, all I'm saying is all of it's great. And I'm like,
and we're both over here like, nope, but for different reasons.
Well, that's the thing. I do want to say, though, I think the sitcom stuff kind of gets weaker as it goes along because I think that it shows its hand too early and it doesn't have as much up its sleeve as it maybe thinks it does. And I think that's why they maybe dropped the reveal as early as they do. Because by that 3rd episode, I was like, okay, I got it, but I get your formula for an episode already. I'm ready for a little bit more. And then they gave me something else entirely that I thought was worse. Like, so the thing is, like, the second half of, like, every episode is generally, of the sitcom stuff, is generally structured around, like, a wacky thing, like a situation. I know it's situational comedy, but, like, the second half of the first episode, after the ad break, is all about a dinner. And then the second half of the second episode is all about a magic show. And the second half of the third episode is all centered around Teyona Paris and I think that's how you say her name. I've only ever seen her written down. like her trying to talk to Elizabeth Olsen while there's like a thing she's trying to change as it's walking around her. And that's like most of that second half of that third episode. And I thought, okay, I'm noticing the pattern. The first half is all set up for a situation that will take up much of the second half. And then luckily that third episode is concerned with like the birth of her kids and then like kind of expelling Monica out of, or Geraldine out of the hex and like and all that kind of stuff. But I was like kind of like right off the bat I was like, oh, they're doing all this stuff and it's like she's she's filtering her grief and her trauma through television and she's doing blah 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 blah. I was able to get all of that almost like right away. And then there was like another episode of it and I went, yeah, that's cool. I like this. It's still the same thing. And then I waited a whole week and I got a third episode and I was like, it's still kind of the same thing. And then I waited a whole week and then I got the sword stuff. But I think though, like once you have the sort of happening as a subplot to the primary sitcom stuff, I think the sitcom stuff does become less formulaic, and you start, and then I think that's when the actors are able to shine a little bit. Like I think that there's a good bit where like Wanda and Vision are arguing over credits, and you have like in one of the episodes like a Halloween episode, and I like how they kind of are doing a special guest. It's like a special holiday episode of a series, and it's also kind of pulling back the layers. But it's like stuff that Vision is figuring stuff out that we already know though, and so that's where it starts to be. That's where I'm like, well, great now because I already know sword stuff, this is a lot less exciting to me now because I know about sword. So I feel like if they ditched a lot of the formula, or they played around with the formula, or maybe had a little bit more to say about what Wanda's going through with each episode, that stuff would have been a lot better as it kind of went along. But as is, I thought it started off great. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Fine now because it's the same thing. But that's what I wanted to say. That was like I wasn't like completely in love with all of the sitcom stuff all the time.
For me, this may be just another thing where we'll both have to agree to disagree. But the longer the show went on, once we got up into like 1980s, I guess like Full House, and then like Malcolm in the Middle type stuff, I was a little bit more on board because like, in general, I think if you put me in front of an episode of like the Dick Van Dyke Show, I doubt that I would crack a smile. My sense of humor is not aligned with the general public's sense of humor from 70 years ago. And so like, shows have changed and evolved over the years. And so like a sitcom today is going to do things that a sitcom from the 50s would not do. And so like I will say like, I think any episode of Modern Family is probably going to be funnier to me than any episode of Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie or whatever, The Honeymooners, I don't know. And so like as we got closer to present day sitcoms, I was more on board with it, but also that could be because as we got closer to the end of the season, the show was less concerned with let's do this era of sitcom, because you also had Vision is starting to explore what's going on, and Sword is starting to explore what's going on. So there was also just less sitcom-y stuff. But like, there was a couple of moments where it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of cute, and this is a little bit funny, because it was getting closer to an era of television that I appreciate more than what it started off as.
I get that, and I can see where you're coming from, and on a certain level, I agree with you. But I do think there are still moments where, like, Sparky the dog dies, and it's like I can't tell if that scene where it was a horrible, corny, like, life lesson scene from a sitcom, or if this is a corny life lesson scene from a sitcom. And you just can tell that they kind of have their tongue-in-cheek, just kind of honestly doing something. But that's usually it's kind of tongue-in-cheek recreation of kind of older humor. But this is like a trope in sitcoms, especially during like the 80s, like a very special episode of Family Matters, where we talk about drugs or something. And this one is like, oh, this is like we got to learn it. We got to teach the kids about death or whatever. I like the sitcom stuff as it goes on, but there are a few scenes where I'm fuzzy on what it's trying to convey.
Okay, yeah, I think I can meet you with that, because like the kid's dog died, and then like I can kind of see that, like it's tonally a mixed bag and you're not really sure what you're supposed to be taking away from it. I can see that. One thing you said a little while back, you said whenever the aspect ratio changed, you wanted to get up and leave, and I think you were saying that more because you just did not like the sword stuff itself. I hated that the aspect ratio was changing. I hate when a show or movie thinks that they're being clever and says, "Look at us, we're changing the aspect ratio now." I just can't stand that. I don't like that people think they're being clever when that's just not that interesting. So I kind of get that it's like, okay, these sitcoms are of a certain aspect ratio, the ones that we're parodying, but then we want to show you the stuff in the real world is different. But we're smart enough to know that, like, okay, there's Jimmy Woo. He's not in the hex, so he's not part of the sitcom. That's enough. You don't have to do, now look at us, we're being coy and we're changing the ratio a little bit. I could not stand that at all. I don't know how you felt about that, but I hated that.
I don't know. I thought that was fine. Because I think all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or most of them, are in that anamorphic widescreen. I think Ant-Man and the first Avengers cover, like, they're a full 16:9. I don't know, like, because these television shows were in a different aspect ratio, so kind of putting them in that aspect ratio made sense to me. And so whenever we were in the proper cinematic universe or whatever, it's shifting aspect ratios, like, I got it, but I also kind of agree it would have been neat if the whole thing was kind of square.
I guess because, like, when I watch a movie, I'm not really paying attention to what the aspect ratio is. The 1999 Mummy movie, I know I have seen it in two different aspect ratios, because there's one aspect ratio where at one point Rick O'Connell is standing next to his future brother-in-law, and, like, in one version, Rick, like, looks at him, and the brother-in-law guy, he, like, kind of nods his head at him. But there's another aspect ratio that cuts off the brother-in-law, and so you just see Rick look off screen. And so that is, like, the only time where I've said out loud, like, oh, that's weird. Like, that's something I've never seen before. And, like, most of the time, though, like, if I watched all of the Marvel movies back to back, I wouldn't really take notice of, like, this one is in a different aspect ratio than all the others. But when it's a show, and, like, in the show you can see suddenly the screen starting to stretch, I'm just like, stop it. That's not clever. I don't like it. Like, that's entirely just a personal problem for me.
I know, I get that. And honestly, aspect ratios are usually something I don't even notice. The Mandalorian, the first episode of season 2, there's an aspect ratio shift. And it wasn't until, like, a minute or two after it shifted where I thought, wait a second, this looks a little different. So I want to talk about Sword. Can we dig into
Sure,
Sword?
yeah.
So I understand the function of Sword. If an entire city was just sort of taken off the grid and there was a weird anomaly occurrence around this town, a government agency would absolutely get involved. I get this. However, I have a question. How long has Sword been around? If Nick Fury was, like, kind of ashamed about the corruption of S.H.I.E.L.D., why would he keep Sword around after S.H.I.E.L.D. blew up? Why would he do this? Thirdly, Commander Hayward being a really obnoxious bad guy just makes Monica's mom look bad. Thirdly, why is this government agency that's about, like, extraterrestrial stuff, why is it centered around something on Earth? Fourthly, why is there a whole subplot about, like, a sort of, why are they bringing in somebody like Darcy and other specialists? Wouldn't they have those specialists with them already? I don't know. These are just some questions I have.
Okay. To answer one of your questions, in the comics, I don't know how much you've read of Sword in the comics. I don't remember what it stands for, but here they changed the acronym so that it is Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. So I guess the Sword in this universe is more about, we're looking into, like, you know, superhumans and stuff like that on Earth, whereas in the comics, Sword is more about kind of being that protector between Earth and whatever aliens come and go. Which itself poses 1,000 problems, because you look at the Marvel Universe and how many dozens of alien invasions there have been, and where has Sword been for most of that? They're just kind of over here not doing their job. But, like, here, I don't think that they are, initially anyway, I don't think they're focused on aliens. I think it's more about, like, various superpowered people, like the Vision, like, he's doing something weird, we have to look into it. And so I think that's their function. As far as S.H.I.E.L.D., I've always hated how these movies and this world handles the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. in The Winter Soldier and then immediately chooses not to do anything with that. Like in The Winter Soldier, S.H.I.E.L.D. basically gets dismantled because there's corruption within, and then immediately in all the following movies, it's like, oh, like there it is, like S.H.I.E.L.D. people come to the rescue in Age of Ultron, even though S.H.I.E.L.D. fell apart. Or like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. goes on for another 2,000 seasons, even though S.H.I.E.L.D. fell apart. And so, like, and I think I've seen like 3 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I have no idea why S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a thing in that show, even though in the movies we are told that S.H.I.E.L.D. was disbanded. But I'm assuming my thinking is that S.W.O.R.D. is a separate division that's completely autonomous and away from S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, now, at the end of this series, there's a post-credit scene that leads you to believe that maybe Nick Fury is involved with S.H.I.E.L.D. or with S.W.O.R.D., and if he is, then that throws away everything I just said about this being a separate entity. But I'm assuming that if S.H.I.E.L.D. fell apart because there was corruption there, that S.W.O.R.D. was eventually put together. Someone said, we need something that's a little more organized and there's not as much corruption. Let's start over fresh, and we're going to create S.W.O.R.D. at some point. I don't know when it was put together because it had to have been sometime before Infinity War, and more specifically, it had to be sometime after Captain Marvel, which, that was in the 90s because Monica's mom was a leader in this division. So I don't really know when it was put together, but that whole timeline thing didn't bother me too much.
S.H.I.E.L.D. was my least favorite thing about the early days of the MCU, and when they like folded that thing into a ball and kicked it into the stratosphere in Winter Soldier, like the movies got better. I think anyways. And now we're just going back to some kind of like government agency bureaucracy or whatever, and I don't like that. I would like it more if the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff or the S.W.O.R.D. stuff I thought was not dumb, but like I think it is. And so I think the one part of the S.W.O.R.D. stuff, let's start from the beginning, because that 4th episode begins with Monica rematerializing after Avengers Endgame, right? And that stuff I thought was really cool. It served as a really kind of cool introduction for her. She goes to work, she's good at her job, and immediately I'm like, I like Monica. Monica is cool. And then they just get rid of her, and I have to deal with Jimmy Woo and Darcy. Now, let me get one thing out of the way. I really like Randall Park. I think he's funny. I think he's got a unique screen presence, and I think that he's a pretty good actor. I don't know what he's doing in this role. I didn't like him in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I feel like the best way I can approximate what I dislike about, or like what I'm getting from his performance is, that sometimes when you're like let's say you and me and 3 other people are all in a group together, right? And I say, if I ever make it to the news, I'm going to like blink 5 times in a row and it's going to look real weird. But you all know that I'm just like, this is like an inside joke between the 5 of us that I'm being a dork, right? And so then I get interviewed on the news, and then I like blink 5 times really, really fast. And then like you guys are all watching it going, oh, he did the thing. It's funny because it's like an inside joke between us and whoa, right? This feels like the inside joke with his buddies is that he's going to be in the biggest franchise in the world, and he's going to deliver every line as bluntly and without charisma as possible. Not badly, not like he's a bad actor, but like all of his lines of dialogue are like, I wonder why this is happening. What did they say? Oh, it's like stock placeholder dialogue, and he just says it without like any like inflections. It's like he's trying to act like an NPC or something. And like people say they think he's very funny in this show. I'm trying to think of like any jokes he said, because like I don't know, he just like says lines, and I'm like, how do you make Randall Park a flatline? This is weird to me.
Okay. I didn't pick up on any of that. If I went back and watched some of his specific scenes, I might be able to. I thought he was just fine in Ant-Man and the Wasp as like a, not really a threat, but just kind of a nuisance, and he's kind of annoying, and like I was like, okay, that's fine. I like him as an actor as well. What I liked here was that he's actually a fairly competent agent. I kind of liked that they did that. I thought he had plenty of good screen presence, but like I said, I didn't really pick up on his weird line delivery. But if I went back and watched episodes or scenes with him again, I might pick up more on that. That I wouldn't say he was just a funny character necessarily. I like of the all the stuff in the sword scenes. I guess he's not as stoic as Monica or Haywood. But he's not as like, haha, I said a funny like Darcy. I don't know. I kind of like the scene where Darcy said, "I'm calling it the hex because it's hexagonal shaped and it's catching on." And then Monica like looks at Wu and he kind of shakes his head no. I kind of thought that was funny, but it wasn't like weeks later I'm going to be laughing about it. It was more of a, haha, I get it. And then like there's one scene where they're watching what's going on, and Wanda and Vision have just had babies, and Darcy is eating chips, and she says, "Do you want one?" And he thinks she says, "Do you want a kid?" And he starts like going off like, "Yeah, maybe someday." "Oh, you meant the chip." "Yeah, okay." Like again, it was kind of like in Batman vs Superman where I thought she was with you. Like it's not a funny line, but in the context of that dreary, dour movie, it did make me laugh because it was the closest thing to a funny line. That's kind of like what's going on here, where it's like there's not a whole lot else going on, so even though it wouldn't even make me crack a smile in a funnier thing, in the context of this show, I was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah. So I got a question about Darcy, because like I will say, for the record, most people I encounter do like the sword stuff. What is Darcy's problem? Because she seems to be very like it seems arbitrary. Like she seems very annoyed by a lot of people, but it seems arbitrary who she is annoyed by and who she isn't annoyed by. It's like she's read the script and knows who is a good guy and who is a bad guy. And like there will be parts where she'll show up and a person will just be like, "Oh, hey, we need you to do this job," and then it's like there's a town that is like imprisoned in like their mind, and like they don't know if they're like they're posing a threat. We don't know what the situation is, so people are a little stern, and her attitude is, how come nobody's like greeting me with a hug and a big high five and a big smile? What's the deal with people around here? These people are so rude. Like, are you flipping kidding me? Like, this is what we're doing in like a professional like produced like show. I guess a lot of the sort of stuff felt like 5-year-olds doing NCIS, where they know that you're supposed to have like quirky characters, but like I don't like the quirks, and it feels like their quirks hinder the functionality of what they're supposed to be doing. If you're a government agency, you should probably be pretty like, all right, let's get to the point. What's going on here? And it's like Darcy just has like magical research powers where she can just like click a computer and whatever she wants it to do, it can do. And so it's like, well, I have magical computer powers, so like people should just be like, they should be treating me like I'm their best friend. And it's like really annoying to watch a character like that, because I don't like people like that in real life. And like Jimmy Woo is like just kind of not stern with her, and like is kind of patient with her like crap. And then that's why, well, he's one of the good ones, because he's nicer to me than a person who's just kind of stern, and the person who's in charge of this whole operation just wanting me to do my job. What a jerk. He just wants me to do my job. Now then people go, but Hayward's a bad guy. It's like, yeah, but we don't know that yet. Like, come on, like cut me some slack here. And then like honestly, the best stuff with Sword is in the second to last episode, where we get the flashback of Wanda going to see Haywood. And they have like a conversation where Haywood's like, look, that is like trillions of dollars worth of like vibranium that you're just going to put in the box in the ground. And it's also could potentially be used as a weapon and like all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm siding with her in this, but I understand how he, like the leader of an agency, is coming to this conclusion and is viewing this in like the way he is. Like, it makes sense. This conflict now makes sense. And him repurposing the footage of her like walking in there, like, that all like makes sense. That like, good, that's how you do a shady government leader. That's how you do that. The rest of it, like, it makes him look like a big doof too. Or like they send in a drone and they like send a missile at her, and it's like, if you're just here to like potentially save people, why are you gonna potentially blow it all up? Like, you dummy. Like, I don't get him either. Like, especially like he starts acting like a G.I. Joe villain, where he's just like so gung ho, and then he makes like a big dumb decision with like wanting to blow up the place, and then afterward he's like, well, now we know how powerful she is. It's like, shut up. Like, that's not an excuse. What's the deal? And it's like, I know that it's not supposed to be an excuse, it's supposed to be a lame excuse, but like, he's only given that kind of material because he's the bad guy,
Yeah.
and that's it. And like that bugs me.
Yeah, I didn't like how pretty much as soon as he shows up there at their like little base right outside the Hex, pretty much as soon as he shows up, everyone is like, "Oh, I don't like him. He's giving me bad vibes." And it's like you're really telegraphing hard that he is going to be an antagonist. And like we had the one scene with him and Monica in episode 4 where it's showing her come back to work and it's like they're friends. They have witty banter with each other. And then everything after that, it's like, okay, light switch. Now he's a bad guy. Jimmy Woo kind of doesn't get along with him. Darcy doesn't get along with him. And it's like you said, it's like they've read the script and they know that they're supposed to not get along with him. And I did not like that. I think it would have been better if everything leading up to like I'm going to spoil something huge. Everything leading up to the reveal that they have been building another vision and they've got the white vision there, and everything leading up to that, if he was like on their side and then secretly he's doing stuff, and then somehow, I don't know how you would do this, he sends in like, because I think his whole goal, he's there to absorb some power from Wanda so that he can reanimate white vision. Like that was secretly what he was up to throughout a good chunk of this episode or this season. And they don't know that. So like when he sends in the drone that's armed, they're all like, "What are you doing? You're ruining our chance to like talk to her peacefully." But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to reanimate the vision. And then all these innocent people can be hanged as long as I can bring in this weapon and give it to the government. I'll be a hero. But everything leading up to that, I think, should have been a little bit more mysterious about what is he doing? Is he on their side or has he got ulterior motives? And it does not handle any of that with any care at all. I will very much agree with you there. Like I think you and I don't disdain the government stuff in the MCU as much as you do, but I can kind of see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, if his plan was to get Wanda's power to power the reanimated corpse of the Vision, and Wanda is making the Hex walls out of her power, why don't you just throw like a drone at the wall? It'll bounce off and now have her powers on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess since then we'd have like a 3-episode season. But the
okay. There's another thing though. There's another thing with the with Monica though. She gets jetted out of the Hex, and then it's like she's like all of a sudden on Wanda's side because she's because okay, so here's the thing that so this is the thing that the sword stuff is all about. I feel like the sword stuff is trying to be like commentary on people who watch shows, because there's like the part where they're just sitting in front of a TV. They have big boards that are like big speculation questions, like what is it with hexagons, and they're theorizing like why is it jumping from one era to the next, and it's like it's I get that that's poking fun at it's like trying to say something about people who watch television and the speculation culture I was talking about earlier. But I don't feel like it's saying anything about it. It's just saying this is a thing that happens. People watch shows, they get invested in them, and they speculate about what's going to happen. And there's a conversation though that happens later, where after Monica gets out of the Hex, and it's like a conversation is like I understand this is intentional, but it comes across to me it was like kind of embarrassing to watch it in execution, because you can do this well, and when you do it well it's impressive, but when you do it wrong it looks like this show where they're basically just talking like fanboys on a playground, where one of them's like, Wanda Maximoff was even more powerful than Thanos. You guys remember Thanos? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh yeah, but she didn't do that because of this. And hey, she's been an ally with the Avengers, but not always, because she started out as a bad guy. So maybe she's still a bad guy, yes, but she made friends with the Avengers. So it's like, I was shocked. I was watching like grown adults reading that dialogue, because it's like that's where the you trying to be a little meta about like, oh, this is a show about people who are watching television now. That is at odds with the actual reality within the show of this is a government agency trying to figure out what's going on. It's not as like pragmatic and like sterile as it should be and boring as it should be. And then like Teyonah Parris shows up and she's like, well, my mind got stuck in a mind prison and I was a puppet controlled by Wanda, and you know what though? I know what she's feeling. She threw me 100 miles out of a Hex, and I dramatically said, it's all Wanda. I know I did all that, But because I've seen other Avengers movies, I know she's a good guy. So I'm on her side about this. Why? Everything the show has done up until this point has given you the perfect case for why you should be this her. But you're not, because we're setting you up as a hero for a future movie. Wanda's a hero, so we want to have a team up with them later, I'm sure, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I guess let's go ahead and segue into, is Wanda a bad guy or not? Because I don't think this show knows the answer to that. Maybe you have a different read on this, but I really hated how this tried to like absolve Wanda of a lot of the awful, awful stuff she does. So basically, she feels bad because her husband died, and she has reality altering powers, so she decides she's going to recreate him and live the perfect sitcom life that she watched sitcoms when she was a kid, and she envisioned had a plan to buy this house in Westview and grow old together. And so in order to do that, I guess she thinks that she has to imprison an entire town in this perfect little world that she's creating. I mean, in theory, all she had to do was just create a field around that empty lot and just live with Vision in that house. She didn't have to also ruin everyone's lives, but she did that. And then I felt like, again, I haven't been very engrossed in the dialogue about the show, but I feel like a lot of people are like, well, she's been through trauma, so it's okay. No, it's not. And then like, what was it? Which episode was it where it was Agatha all along? Was that episode 6?
Episode 7.
Okay. So
Yes.
at that point, they're trying to say like, Agatha's been behind everything. No, she hasn't. In episode 2, we see a guy come out of the sewer wearing a beekeeper costume. We have no idea who that is until episode 4. It's one of Hayward's men. Hayward, I'm never going to get that right. It's one of his men. He has been sent in to investigate and see what's going on. And Wanda sees him and says, nope, I'm not having that. You're here to ruin what I've created. You're here to save these people that I have enslaved. I'm getting rid of you. And I have no idea what even happens to that guy. And she knows what she's doing. But then later on, anytime Vision calls her out and says, what are you doing? She says, I don't know. And then like even up until the very end, she says, I didn't know what I was doing to these people. I wasn't aware. Yes, you were. Like, Wanda knows that she has ruined these people's lives, and they are going to be spending the rest of their lives in therapy because of her screwing around with their lives and screwing around with their minds. And we're supposed to be okay with it because she's a superhero and she's one of the Avengers and her husband died. I'm not on her side. Like, I was really thinking the show was going to end in more of a, like, she is pretty much like a villain by the end. And it kind of, sort of, a lot of times the MCU wants to do something big and then they want to walk back from the consequences of it. Like Steve and Tony's friendship falls apart in Civil War, and then the next time we see either of them, they're both back to, like, they're almost ready to be like working together again. And so like, that's one of those things I kind of wish we could have had like another couple of movies in between Civil War and Infinity War, so we could have seen, here's the consequences.
Oh, they don't see,
do what?
They don't see each other in Infinity War.
Right. But I guess what I should say is we see Tony in Homecoming, and that was before Infinity War, and then we see Steve in Infinity War, and we see Tony in Infinity War, and Tony almost calls Steve to say like, hey, I need your help, and then he doesn't do it. And so I still feel like we needed a little bit more breathing room to show the consequences of the Avengers have fallen apart because of these two.
Gotcha.
But like here, Wanda has, goodness knows how many people she has just royally screwed up in the head because she wanted to have a little happy ending and we should feel bad for her. And then at the end, she says, well, this would, I gave up my sons and my husband and they'll never know what I gave up because, that won't change what I did to them. You're right, it won't change. And then she leaves, and I don't know what she's doing at the end. That's probably one of those things we're going to find out in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, but I don't know how you felt about it, but I feel like the show should have either, like, at the end, when she's talking to Monica, she should have said, okay, cuff me, take me in, I want to face the consequences of what I've done, or she should have said, don't come looking for me. I'm dangerous, and this proves it. I'm going to do whatever I want, whatever I have to do to bring my sons back. I'm going to try again. Like, it should have been one way or another, and it just kind of is waffling on that.
Yeah. I also have a similar hesitation towards what it's wanting to do with Wanda. So it's like, when it starts off, the reveal that, okay, so first of all, this is like such a nitpick. It almost doesn't even like require attention, but I'm gonna say it anyways. I guess this plot of LandVision purchased did not get like recounted or like reacquired by the bank in 5 years. But that not with. By the way, did he just like cut off his finger and then sell that vibranium to buy a house? But
I didn't even think about
anyways,
that.
he pawned off a piece of himself so that he could. Anyway, so but like when she's at that plot of land, she just kind of explodes, and I don't think she intended for this to happen. And I think that having the morally ambiguous character of, there are aspects of this thing she's created that she just does not understand or doesn't even know that she's necessarily doing, but that doesn't change the fact that she is doing it. I feel like there does need to be more consequence for her, and there's not. Honestly, the ending is really sloppy in how it tries to resolve a lot of things, because it wants to have Agatha imprisoned in the hex for the rest of time, but then she dissolves the hex and returns everything back to normal also. Those two things seem at odds with one another, and I don't know, like, I think that, yeah, there are things that, like, Wanda does that are, like, legitimately terrible things, and she needs to answer for them, but then she goes and apologizes to Teyonah Paris? What? Like, that, like, why? Oh, no, it's because she's the one who's like, hey, look, I just lost a mommy, and look, I get you, and I know how you feel. I got it. Well, it's very convenient that, the one person you're going to apologize was or like, maybe she chose the person to apologize to was her. Whatever reason, having in the screenplay her, like, reconciling what she's done through an apology to the one character who probably got hexed, who got, like, the most out of the hex, like, that's sloppy. Like, there are going to be people who will not forgive her, but they, like, just had her apology to the person who absolutely would forgive her. Like, that's I don't like that.
Yeah. And yeah, you raise a good point about at the end she mind wipes Agatha, who it's so hard to talk about this. So in the show, Catherine Hahn, she is the wacky, nosy next door neighbor type. Like, in the very first episode, she comes in and says, "Hey, new neighbors, here's some ham or whatever. I'm giving you, a housewarming gift." And then she keeps showing up. And then in episode 7, we find out her name is not Agnes. Her name is Agatha Harkness, who in the comics is not a bad guy. She so in the comics, Wanda first appears in the X-Men. She was one of Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, and basically her mutant power was like basic probability stuff. Like, she would point at a bowl of soup and it would spill into someone's lap. Something innocuous like that. And then by the time you got into the 80s, and then she and Quicksilver joined the Avengers in the 60s. And then, so by the time you get in the 80s, John Byrne said, "This doesn't make sense. I need to make her powers much more complicated and make even less sense." So he said, it's not, her mutant power is not like basic stuff. It's like she is fundamentally changing reality every time she uses her powers. And somewhere along the way, someone decided she's not just a mutant, but she's also a sorceress. And so the Fantastic Four's nanny, who looks after Franklin Richards, she is brought in to teach Wanda sorcery. And so in the comics, she's like an Aunt May looking old crone. And here, obviously, if they had someone who looked like that, then people would have looked at it from a mile away and said, "Hey, it's Agatha Harkness." But so they changed her name to Agnes, which is similar to Agatha, because if they called her Agatha from episode 1, everyone would have looked up. Like, I'm assuming people were Googling Tyler Haywood to see if he's a character from the comics so that they could get a leg up. It's kind of like what you were talking about with prediction culture, where everyone wants to feel like they're the smartest person in the room, so they're going to Google all these characters to see who they are, so that they can say, "Oh, that's Monica Rambeau. In the comic, she's, whatever." And so if they have to change her name to Agnes so that people can't Google that, but it's still similar to Agatha. But then we find out, so basically there's two sets of bad guys with completely unrelated plans. You have Haywood, who wants to recreate the Vision so that he can go to the U.S. government and say, "Look, this $1 trillion weapon is in our control. Look at the awesome thing that I did." And also he wants to kill Wanda and the Vision she has created in the Hex so that there's no evidence of what he did. And then also Agatha, she wants to, I'm going to put a big question mark on this, absorb all of Wanda's power for herself. I don't know what Agatha is doing throughout this season. Like, we've got the cute little "It Was Agatha All Along" song, but I don't know what she's doing in those scenes where we're looking back. Like, and she says, "I killed Sparky too." Okay, why? Why did you kill Sparky? Like, are you trying to like do things so that Wanda will shoot power at you? Because we see in a flashback that she was almost burned in a Salem witch trial-esque thing, but it was other witches who did it. Isn't that a twist? And they all like shoot magic at her, and then she absorbs it and becomes more powerful, and they all die. So I guess that is what has to happen for her to absorb Wanda's magic. But what is she doing before she lures Wanda into the basement? Like we see in the Agatha All Along song, like when they're doing the magic show in episode 2, she does something. She casts some kind of spell, but I have no idea what she's doing. I don't know what her overall plan is here.
I don't know either. I've actually been thinking about that the last couple of days. It's like she says, "You got to tell me how you did this." What? And then Elizabeth Olsen's just like, "I don't know. What?" And then she's like, "Tell me how you did it. We're gonna go back in time." So they go into the Wayback Machine, and they like start looking at like her past. And then Elizabeth Olsen is having this like emotional like it's like a therapy for her. And then Agatha's like, "Oh, okay, so you did a probability spell." And she's like, "No." I don't think so. Agatha's like, "Whoa, I gotta know. And like that's sort of like the element of like having that trope of like a TV like kind of like the secret villain, but then it's like by the time you get to the final episode, they didn't really know what to do with a lot of these like television tropes that they were having fun with, like particularly like Evan Peters, Quicksilver showing up. They had no idea what to do with that. And same thing with oh my husband Ralph, Ralph, the character who's often mentioned but never seen. They tie that with something else that I don't think works at all. And then like when you have like this like secret like long-term plan, I don't know I don't even know what the plan was. It was like I was just monitoring you this whole time to know how you did this.
But
okay, if she's already done it, why would she do it again?
Yeah, why does she need to know why does Agatha need to know who taught Wanda? All she wants is Wanda's power. It doesn't matter who taught Wanda. She just wants Wanda to shoot red bolts at her so that she can absorb that. It doesn't matter who taught her. Why does she want to know, like, how did you do this? How did you create this? It doesn't matter. All you want is for her to shoot power at you. You should have, in the 1950s, you should have come in like Norman Bates and say, "Haha, I'm here to kill you." And then she shoots power at you, and then mission accomplished. But again, we would have had a 20-minute episode long season. And so, like, this is where it comes back to like some of the fan theories where like, on the one hand, I'm with you. I don't like when everyone tries to look at me. I'm the smartest person in the room. I figured out what they were doing before they told us what they were doing. But on the other hand, some of the fan theories I saw were more interesting than what this show did. Like, I saw so many people thinking that Mephisto is going to be here, and Mephisto is basically the Marvel Comics version of the devil. And he was back in the 80s when John Byrne did the thing where Wanda's children disappeared. It was this one bad guy that I don't think anyone has heard of called Master Pandemonium. It turned out that he had absorbed the kids into his soul, and then it turned out there was another layer where Mephisto was involved also. And it's been probably 15 years since I read that comic, but the reveal was, okay, Mephisto is kind of behind it. And I think everyone thought that Mephisto was going to be somehow involved with this. Like, one of my problems is, in the same way where I didn't like the first couple of episodes because I didn't think anything was going on, I don't like that pretty much all of the cards are shown to us by the end of episode 7. By the end of episode 7, we find out that Agatha is Agatha and that she's a sorceress, and also we find out that Hayward wanted to absorb some of Wanda's power to create the Vision, the new Vision. And then episode 8 and 9, we don't get any further wrinkle in that. I was expecting, like I said, Mephisto is controlling Agatha in the same way that Wanda is controlling everyone in town. Something like that. It could be thematically important, and it would be a further, oh wow, that's crazy, I didn't see that coming, or something like that. But after episode 7, it's basically, okay, now it happens exactly like you think it's going to happen. There is no further revelation or twist or anything like that. And I don't necessarily want a twist just for the sake of having a twist, but also at the end of episode 7, once you've told us, okay, these are our bad guys, then that's it. Those are our bad guys. I wish we could have had something different happen there.
Yeah, I don't know. On the one hand, I like having like you don't need to have like a big twist every episode, and I like that by the end of episode 7, all the twists are all kind of sorted out, and then you have like 2 episodes of bringing the ship into harbor, and like I think that second to last episode is pretty great. And I think that, I mean, I think it's actually the most emblematic of the entire show. And then I think episode 9 does try to have like twists it throws in as well as wrapping things up. And I think that the twists they throw in there kind of make the wrap up less interesting. So on top of Agatha Harkness, I don't know her plan, and she just absorbs powers. You could have just like thrown a knife at her and then, yeah, like you said, absorbed her powers that way. And they just kind of throw in some half-baked, I was trying to monitor you to know how you did some things. Don't think about it. But like so I want to say, I think Catherine Hahn in this show she plays Agatha. She's generally a lot of fun. She hams up the nosy neighbor shtick very well. And then she has to play Agatha Harkness, and honey, I'm sorry. I feel so bad for her. The dialogue she needs to read is some of the most blunt, on-the-nose dialogue I've ever heard from, like, a major studio. It's like, this is the Darkhold, the Book of the Damned. Like, that's a line of dialogue, and she tries shaking it up a little bit more, but then it's like, you are a Scarlet Witch, there is only one of you. And, like, the beginning of episode 8 is just, like, her saying, I'm a magic person for 5 minutes straight. She's just like, oh, here is a spell I can do. And this is another spell I can do. And by the way, the runes in a witch's space means that only she can cast those spells there. And like that line of dialogue is so blunt and like divorced of anything kind of spicy. It is just like bland exposition that you don't need to repeat it. And then at the very end, like after the QuickTime event climax, Scarlet Witch goes, aha, you see, I fooled you. I got one up on you. I said, you know, then she basically just repeats the line. And I said, oh, don't worry. I got it. You don't need to repeat it, because it was as blunt now as it was back then. And she's just like, oh, yes. And then, like, even though I like episode 8, that, like, she'd always go, so what you did was a probability hex. Oh, then you were brought here. Now let's go. It's like all lines like that. It's like, so, it was like, I couldn't believe that. Like, Catherine Hahn, honey, like, you are trying your best to try to, like, ham it up with, like, I'm a witch. Woo! But she, sometimes, like, there are some actors where you can just give them anything and they can give you gold out of it. I can't imagine any actor turning gold out of this dialogue. Yeah. That specifically Agatha Harkness was given.
Yeah, and that's like you said, it's difficult to play multiple characters in one role. Like, you know, actors are obviously supposed to transform themselves, and so Luke Skywalker is very different than the Joker. And, you know, Mark Hamill, in my opinion, does a really good job at being the naive farm boy who's thrown into a larger world and has to save the universe. And then also he's really good at playing the sadistic but joyful torturer killer guy. And so those are two very different roles. But trying to transform within the same context and role is not an easy feat. You know, I've seen people say, like, and I've only watched one episode of Breaking Bad, but I've seen people say that Bryan Cranston does a really good job of that, where he's playing like the dad and a family man, but he also plays like a power hungry, twisted supervillain type. And then you look at I think you've watched Malcolm in the Middle. I've never watched a full episode, but he plays kind of a dad in a sitcom-y, you know, family environment there as well. And so like I think someone could have done something with this, but the dialogue also it feels very, this is a two-dimensional like superhero comic book. And what is great about the MCU is that it takes silly elements and it makes it cool sometimes. But this, I feel like it almost feels like they're ashamed of like all the superhero-y comic booky tropes. And so it's like, okay, let's just give her really stilted villain dialogue. Like, you know, he starts monologuing like from The Incredibles. And I think someone could have made it work, but also the dialogue needed to be punched up a little.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about next?
Okay, I have just a couple of quick little, like, it won't take 2 minutes to cover these little points. At one point, Monica says, Wanda, you are telepathic. You had to know, like, and you allowed me to get close to you so that I would help you to give birth to your babies, but you're telepathic, so you knew something was not right with me. When did Wanda become telepathic? Because looking back at her previous appearances in the MCU, I never got the feeling that she was. Like in Age of Ultron, she does her little thing and makes Tony see all the Avengers are dead. And then that's what kicks off the plot of Age of Ultron. And she also is able to do it to other people. She's able to kind of send the Hulk on a rampage. She makes Steve think he's in the 1940s, and Thor sees Heimdall is blind and all that stuff. But I never got the feeling that she was telepathic, just that she could, like, I'm going to wave my hand around and then make you think that you're seeing something, but I wouldn't necessarily know. I didn't get the feeling that she could see what she was making them see, right? And so here they're saying Wanda is telepathic, and I never got that feeling before. And then likewise, out of nowhere, Vision, and you'll have to explain to me why Wanda's Vision creation, the Vision that is in the Hex, why he is not under her control, why she's not able to control him, because I don't entirely understand that, other than we need the plot to move along, so we need somebody to be calling out Wanda and then, like, investigating so that we can get a little bit more stuff going on. But for some reason, Vision is able to, like, touch one of his coworkers in the head, and suddenly he's, like, not in control of Wanda anymore, and he's like, help me, she's in my head. And then later he does it to White Vision and helps him regain his memories. I don't understand how any of that works, or how Wanda's creation is able to do that, especially, like, White Vision is not in control, like, he's not part of the Hex when he does that. Like, he's in the Hex, but he's not one of the people that Wanda is controlling. So there's a lot of that I did not understand at all.
That's a good point, because what was going on with Vision, I had actually correctly predicted, because I was thinking, like, I don't buy that this, like, corpse has been reanimated, because, like, or even if it is just like a reanimated corpse, how does it have a personality? And I was assuming that it was like she was, like, projecting her like memories of him on in some way, and that's sort of what is happening. But then, like, so, like, how come she can't control him too? Maybe she doesn't want to control him. I don't know. And that's, like, kind of a little frustrating part of this, is, like, what's really going on with her control over the Hex is ill-defined. It's maybe about as ill-defined as her powers are in the comic books. So that's that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, and I was thinking something similar might be happening with Quicksilver. But why don't we talk about Quicksilver, or not Quicksilver? So Evan Peters is in this show. Evan Peters played a version of Pietro Maximoff. He played a character called Peter Maximoff in the 3 films X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix. And those were a different continuity. That was when 20th Century Fox was making X-Men films. Now those rights for the screen have been reverted back to Marvel, but through a loophole that's sort of interesting. Both 20th Century Fox, with their license on the X-Men characters and all mutant kind, and Marvel Studios' control over all the Avengers characters, they both had joint custody of the characters of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And sort of by happenstance, the X-Men franchise kept Quicksilver around. Scarlet Witch wasn't even really there. And then in Age of Ultron, in the film that introduced both Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver died. So we had, like, a Quicksilver and a Scarlet Witch that belonged to one franchise apiece. And now that the X-Men 20th Century Fox X-Men franchise is null and void, it's gone. Now there is no Quicksilver. And so Aaron Taylor Johnson played Quicksilver in the Marvel movies, and Evan Peters played Quicksilver in the X-Men movies. And then at the end of episode 5, I think, there's a knock at the door, and lo and behold, Evan Peters is standing there and says, "Hey, it's me. I'm your long-lost brother." So that was one killer reveal. I thought that was awesome. And that next episode, the Halloween episode, it was so fun to see basically Evan Peters playing Quicksilver a la Francis the Big Brother from Malcolm in the Middle. That was a lot of fun. It kind of sucks that by the end of it, it doesn't make any sense. But while it was happening, I was having the time of my life, and I liked the conversations that the two of them had, and I really liked how the show was generally handling the relationships until we get to a lot of the payoffs. So that's kind of, I guess I had to lay the groundwork. I'm very curious to know how you felt about the Quicksilver.
Okay. Like I said, once episodes 1 and 2 dropped, I didn't watch any of the show until last week, but I was keeping up with spoilers. So I knew about the Quicksilver thing, not even because of going to like YouTube and watching a video, but I got on Twitter one day and saw Evan Peters trending, and I'm always scared when a celebrity trends because it either means that they're dead or they said something politically controversial. And it turns out neither was the case here. Everyone was like, soiling themselves in excitement, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I didn't want them to do multiverse stuff to bring in the X-Men. I think maybe we talked about this when Endgame came out. I asked you, how do you think they're going to bring in like the Fantastic Four and the X-Men? And I've seen a lot of people say, well, just bring in the Fox characters. Like, let's just say, hey, it's a alternate universe thing. I did not want them to do that because while there is something that I like and appreciate about every one of the Fox X-Men movies, even the bad ones, there's something there in each of them that I like. I really don't like how messed up the timeline is there. Like, nothing makes sense if you try to watch all of the X-Men movies. Sometimes you could watch one movie and then watch the next movie immediately afterward, and it still doesn't make any sense. Like, it is such a jumbled mess. And you get a little bit of that in the MCU, but overall, I think the MCU has done a pretty good job of having this gigantic sandbox that multiple people can play in, and they've done a pretty good job of not messing it up for everyone else to play in, for the most part. And so I was like, no, I don't want you guys to bring in Hugh Jackman and Evan Peters and James McAvoy. I don't want that because then you're connecting this universe that has more or less stayed pretty consistent with this other universe where nothing makes sense. And I did not want that. I didn't want, it's going to be difficult when they actually do get around to doing the X-Men because I still have no idea how they're going to do it. So even though, I know I'm taking a while to say all this, but even though I did not want them to do multiverse stuff, after a couple of episodes of seeing Evan Peters here, I was like, okay, maybe I could buy this. Maybe I'm on board with this. And by the end of the season, then maybe, he's going to snap out of it just like everybody else. And then he's going to be like, I don't live here. I'm supposed to be at home with my mom. And and then he finds out like your mom doesn't exist. Like the address that you gave us, someone else lives there. And then it's like, he's trapped on another world. And since Disney now owns the rights to those movies, they could do that now. And even though that's not how I would have done it, by the time we got to the Halloween episode, I was like, okay, I like what he's doing here. It's not really the Quicksilver from the comics, but, you say that he's trapped in another world and nobody that he knows lives here, and that could kind of give him a little bit of angst, and he could be a little angrier, and that would maybe be a little closer comic book Quicksilver. And so I was kind of getting on board with it. And then you find out, okay, he's maybe working with Agatha, and then you find out that his name is Ralph Boner. And I will say, even though by that point, I was disappointed that they basically were just trolling us for 5 weeks, I did laugh whenever she said, your name is Ralph Boner? And he just laughed and said, Boner. I did kind of think that was funny, but I don't understand how he's able to run with super speed. Agatha, I guess, gave him super speed powers, and then somehow, independently, Wanda gave one of her kids super speed powers, independently. That has nothing to do with Agatha giving this other guy super speed powers. Agatha said, I would have used the real thing, except it's shot up, and by this point, this is 5 years after Infinity War, and so that's like 2024, 2023, something like that. And so
like 8 years
yeah, it's
or
been
something.
like 8 years. So that body is completely decomposed. So yeah, it makes sense she wouldn't be able to reanimate that body. So she puts some pearls, or what are those beads? What? I'm
Puka
okay,
shell.
yeah.
Puka
So
shell.
she has that necklace on him, and I guess that gives him super speed and makes him think that by the end, I don't even know if he knows that he's not Quicksilver. Monica rips off the shells, and I don't understand how, because at one point she tries to run out the door, and he stops her because he's super fast. And then later, she's standing right next to him, and she's somehow able to judo throw him without him using super speed, and then she's able to just rip off the necklace. And then he says, please don't kill me. And I don't know, has he been aware that his name is Ralph Boner this whole time, or did he just realize that he's not Quicksilver when she ripped off the necklace? I don't know. I have no idea. And Monica's awesome. I loved her powers here. I love that scene where she gets shot and the bullets slow down. I thought that was really cool. But I don't know how her powers work. I don't know what her powers are. I don't know why she's not able to run out the door and Quicksilver's able to stop her once. And then later she's able to defeat him easy peasy lemon squeezy. None of that makes any sense. It was all, okay, we've got all this stuff that we have to wrap up. Let's quickly, his name is Ralph because she's been teasing someone named Ralph this whole time. And so by the end, I was disappointed that what I thought could have been an interesting way to like bring in some of the best parts of the X-Men. Like if you want to kind of, you don't want to do an origin movie for the X-Men because everyone knows who the X-Men are. So somehow Wanda does a thing where she says, okay, Hugh Jackman, you're here, and you're Old Man Logan, and Evan Peters, you're here, and you're the new Quicksilver, and Deadpool, everyone likes you, so you're here in this universe. I didn't want them to do that, but then I thought, okay, maybe it could work here. And then they just said, just kidding, it's a guy named Ralph, and he's not Quicksilver. So I don't know, what did you think of all of that?
Them trolling us, I'm cool with. You know me, I admire a good troll. I thought Twin Peaks season 3 was just awesome. So building up like Quicksilver or whatever, and then just kind of dropping him like a ton of bricks, I'm fine with that. That's cool. What I don't get is, where does Agatha come from? How did she find out about the Hex? Because she came into the Hex, she's here on a mission. So how did she find out about it? And so she's been setting up shop. She's been setting up shop in Ralph's house. And Ralph is is Evan Peters. And so then she like mind controls him with puka shell. That's what I was getting, is that she has doing mind control of her own, but using his puka shells as a way of doing that. And so because she has control over him, and she's using Quicksilver as her eyes and ears, she's like giving him super speed and trying to like appeal to Scarlet Witch's better angels by like being like, hey, we're siblings. He's like, I'm not some guy. I'm not your husband. I'm your brother. Like we've known each other like our whole lives. Like you can talk to me. What are you doing? How are you doing this? And she's like, I don't know. And Agatha was like, I guess wasn't satisfied with that, which I don't know. Like if that was my tactic, I would believe her at that point. But anyways, what I don't really get about this, so like Agatha says, I couldn't get the body of the other Quicksilver. Now, you're right, that body is decomposed by this point. However, if that were the ability for her to get that, why not? You're a witch. Can't you just teleport there? Where did you come from? How did you hear about the Hex? And so then she like is using Quicksilver as a way of doing all this, which is fine, but like I don't get how it factors into her plan. It's just another version of what she's already been doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't like about it. And then also, it's okay to have tropes from sitcoms just hanging around and not resolve them. You don't need to make this not Quicksilver guy. You don't need to answer the question of who is Ralph with, oh, it was not Quicksilver. I don't need to know that. Ralph could have just been like some name she made up joke and would have had the exact same results. And so I feel like it's that kind of, that's like, I mean, obviously this show was all written and filmed at once, but like that's like the speculation minded thing of, okay, who won the pool on the Quicksilver's actually a guy named Ralph? Like who won that bet, right? Like I don't know. I don't like that very much. But at the same time, I really like Evan Peters in this role. And I think he's really fun and really funny. And it was really fun to see everybody in their like sort of thrown together Halloween costume versions of their comic book costumes. That was great, with like Vision with the big color and like devil horned Quicksilver and all that. By the way, I wanted to say I saw a funny meme. You were talking about Mephisto earlier, and it was like after the big reveal that like Agatha is like, whatever. There was like one episode left. It was pretty clear that Mephisto wasn't going to show up, and it was like Marvel diehard fans, and it was Harry Osborn from the ending of Spider-Man. James Franco was like, I swear on my father's life, it's Mephisto. I don't know. Like, so the Quicksilver stuff, I'm a little mixed on because I don't like how it resolves. I don't like, you're right. Like, Monica can just like take him out because conveniently he's not using super speed powers. Whatever. Yeah, I don't know. But I will say one thing I do really like about this show is how it handles the twin characters. Because I don't know if I've mentioned this on mic before, but like usually when twins show up in a movie or TV show, I like here we go. I like brace myself and I'll roll my eyes and whatnot, because like there's a very limited application for when people actually use twin characters. I think there's been like 2 movies that I can say that are like examples of like this is how you properly do a twin relationship. One of them is a spoiler, so I won't say what that movie is, and the other one is Gone Girl, and that's fraternal twins played by Ben Affleck and Carrie Coon. I thought their dynamic was like spot on.
Now
great.
hang on a second. You are quite the fan of Godzilla. Are you telling me you don't like those 2 little fairy women who summon Mothra? They.
Hey, look. That's different.
I just wanted to dog on you a little bit. Carry on.
No, I mean I do, but like that's another thing of like at the very least they're like weird impish like magic beings, but at the same time they all speak in unison and they sing in unison and they're weird magical fairy creatures and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not as big on the Mothra mythos as a lot of other kaiju fans are. I like Mothra fine. She's okay. I like Rodan more. Anyways, but with this show, I can actually point to this as like a solid version of twins. Like I know that like Agatha like is behind Quicksilver and whatnot, but I don't think that robs the solid writing of where like where or Evan Peters and what's her face Elizabeth Olsen, they have like good scenes together, and like that dynamic is very believable in those scenes. And then like the 2 identical twins she has, there are a couple of like cringy lines I got to brace myself for, but I don't know if that's just the genre pastiche or if that's just bad writing or whatnot. But it's like, oh, I'm the wacky one, and like, okay, which one is this? Is this the evil one? Is this the funny one? Is this the what I mean? Like you get that a lot as a twin. I by the way, I'm a twin if you're not familiar, listeners. And so, but like I was like amazed that like when they gave them powers, it wasn't like a power and then the other twin has the same power or an inversion of that power. They have unique powers, and one of them can just run really fast, and the other one's kind of like, like, oh, I got the lamer of the 2 powers. And like there's that dynamic between 2 of them, and they were very believable children twins. And I like that a lot. One of them is a little bit more dominant than the other one, and there's like like the personality wise, and like I really liked that. It was not like it wasn't like look at us like it wasn't showing itself off. It was just doing that relationship dynamic in a very good way. So big thumbs up, WandaVision. You did that very well.
And one thing I don't know if you know is, so in the 80s, Wanda and Vision had twins, Billy and Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little while later, John Byrne, in a story in West Coast Avengers, he said, just kidding, this was, a robot and a human can't have kids. Ha ha, aren't you an idiot for thinking that they were real kids? So they're actually fragments of a soul that she grabbed from the ether, and then they got sucked into Mephisto. And so then somehow Wanda's mind gets wiped, so she doesn't remember having children, and then those children getting like snapped away into nothing. And then like 25 years later, House of M's happens, and that's where Wanda is suddenly like, hey, I remember having kids, and now I'm real mad at all you guys, so I'm gonna like screw with reality. And so after House of M, there was a series called Young Avengers, where there were several characters who were all tentatively connected to other Marvel Universe characters, and like Hulkling, spoilers, was a Skrull, but he made himself look like a young version of Hulk. And then you had Isaiah Bradley, I think, who his grandfather was like a prototype to Captain America, who had appeared in a miniseries a while earlier. And so each character kind of had these connections, but they were basing themselves visually off of other Avengers. And there were these 2. There was Billy and Tommy. Billy at first called himself Asgardian, and then later called himself Wiccan. And then Tommy, he could run really fast. And so it's like, hey, these are the twins. Somehow they're here. I don't know how. But so they're kind of pulling a little bit from the old 80s stuff where she had the kids who aren't real, but they're also kind of pulling from their powers that they have in Young Avengers as well.
Okay, I think I may have heard through the Vine that was a thing, because I know that there is like kids in Wanda and Vision and Mephisto and all that stuff. But I wasn't actually sure about all the specifics of it. So I want to say, like, I'm coming off a lot more negative in this discussion than I want to. I think that's because I upon further thinking about it, I think the resolution of a lot of it is really disappointing. There are things I like about it. I really like the Scarlet Witch costume. I like that we can finally call her Scarlet Witch. That's cool. That all being said, I also thought the Vision on Vision fight was really fun. It almost felt like lampooning the Man of Steel fight, where it starts off looking exactly like the Man of Steel Superman versus Zod fight, and then they just stop fighting and like talk it out, and all that stuff I love. I love it whenever Vision has like a weird intellectual like psychology 101 sort of, or philosophy 101 conversation. They're like bringing up like this, like the ship of whatever, and they start like describing like if like, you know, the genuine article is still like what it is, if you have to change boards on like a ship or whatever, like all that stuff is really, really cool. And it was a cool like way of outsmarting him. And then we have the weird like witch fight, which was shockingly uncreative. I said earlier it was like a quick time event. It was like press X and then she throws a red ball. Press X and then she throws a red ball. Press X, press X, press X, press X. And I was like, this is the big finale? Are you kidding me? And someone was like, well, what else are you going to do? I don't know. Get creative with it. Get trippy with it. Get weird with it. They're witches. There's like a cool part where she like disappears and then reappears right behind Agatha to get inside her head. And then that tactic doesn't work. Try something else. Shake it up. You're like, I know you're like trying to like distract her while you're getting the runes on the walls of the hex and all. However, I don't like, you can make this more exciting. Like people go, well, I mean, what else is she supposed to do? I don't know. People wrote and directed this. They can be more creative about it than just having people float around in a circle and throw red balls at each other.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So one thing I wanted to say that I kind of got off topic and lost my thought, but if Ralph Boner is one of the inhabitants of this town. There, in episode 4, we spend a little bit where they are slowly figuring out, okay, Kitty Foreman from That 70s Show, this is her real name, and they find her license somewhere on the internet, and then they post it on their whiteboard, and then they're like, okay, Herb, the next door neighbor, this is his real name, and they are figuring out who all these people are, and we never get a point where any of them say, we have no idea who Agnes is. She doesn't live here. Like, we can't find any information on her at all because they want that to be a surprise. So we don't get a point where they say, who is this Agnes woman? But also, when Pietro shows up, and then on the outside, they say, Wanda just recast Pietro. Shouldn't these people have looked into that and said, wait a minute, his name isn't Pietro, his name is Ralph Boner, because he lives there just like everyone else. And they never do that. Also, I really liked the Vision fight as well. That was probably my favorite thing in the whole series. I really just want 9 episodes of those two talking to each other. I like, because, I mean, he says, my goal is to kill the Vision. And at first I thought, is it? I thought your goal was to fight Wanda. But then the other Vision says, I am only conditionally the Vision. And I thought, oh, yes, here we go. Like, I was just like leaning back. And maybe I was a little hard earlier saying that Vision is a character I don't really care about, but I do like some of his conversations that he has in the earlier movies, but here I quite like that they fight a little bit, but then he says, like he basically just makes him realize this is not gonna work, and I liked all that. And then here's my question, and in the very in the last little bit of this final episode, Vision that Wanda created, they have to have their goodbyes because she is going to tear down the hex, and that means that her sons are not going to exist anymore, and this recreation of Vision is not going to exist anymore. Why didn't this version of Vision say to Wanda, by the way, that white guy that I was fighting, I gave him his memories back, so he remembers being married to you. And then he just flew off. We have no idea where he is. But in theory, he should have, I know it would have gotten in the way of this beautiful moment, but he should have said, your husband is still out there. I'm going to die, but your husband has memories, his actual memories. And so I don't know where White Vision is at the moment, but in theory, I was kind of expecting these two to, like, it's going to be weird. You look different than I remember, but, like, you have memories of being my husband. So, like, I don't know why they didn't reunite after everything was said and done.
Yeah, that was kind of, I was hoping they wouldn't go that route, but, like, I love Paul Bettany, and I love him as the Vision. I kind of wish this was our goodbye to that character, but we have to sort of still keep him around, and I feel like that kind of does a lot of the really, I think, emotionally satisfying stuff that we did with this character in Infinity War and in this show. And so, yeah, I don't know why they did that. Also, I just want to say, I like how at the end he's like, Wanda, can you please answer me a question? She's like, sure. He's like, what am I? And I was expecting a CW answer where she was going to go, you are the love of my life. And then he had to go like, no, Wanda, literally, what am I? How do I have thought right now? But then she actually has like an answer, and I like how they try like writing it as like a legit, sincere love poem written by the nerdiest person on planet Earth. And I don't know, it kind of worked for me where she's like, you are the piece of the Mind Stone that lives inside me. Like that was I don't know. I thought I was like, hey, you know what? They're going for it. Kudos for that. I will say though the ending of the post credit scene has me a little intrigued. I don't know if you watched till the very end of the credits of the last episode.
Are we talking about? I'm going to go ahead and say it. Scrolls? Is that what we're talking about?
No, after that.
Oh, she's in a cabin? Is that
yes.
Okay? Yes, I was about to say, oh no, I missed one. I was confused. I don't know what she's doing. She's looking through a book. Is it the Darkhold? Is that what she's looking through?
I'm assuming she's looking through the Darkhold while she's in the astral plane, and I was like, I thought I heard her kids screaming or something.
Yeah.
So maybe and her next appearance is going to be in Multiverse of Madness, I believe. So maybe she jumps into the multiverse to find the multiverse where her kids are for real or something.
Okay.
I don't know.
And see, that's the thing, is that we have known for a very long time that Wanda is going to have something to do in Multiverse of Madness. And so I was thinking in these last 15, 20 minutes, maybe she turns herself in, and then Monica says, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, because, she knows Jimmy, Jimmy knows Ant-Man, Ant-Man knows Doctor Strange, and then we can, you're on house arrest, but you're going to learn how to control this so that this doesn't happen again, and you'll be his disciple, his apprentice. And I thought that could be cool, seeing her, a kind of Jedi, a Padawan situation going on there. Or, she ends up being the bad guy. Like, she says, I'm going to go off and, I'm going to try to recreate my sons and my husband again. Don't follow me. And then she, tears a hole in reality, and Doctor Strange has to fix it. I saw a meme on on Twitter where someone, it was a screenshot from Arrested Development where, I can't remember his name, but the dad who's in prison, where in the actual show he said, I have the worst effing lawyer ever. And somebody said, all the people living on this planet saying, we have the worst effing Sorcerer Supreme ever. Because he's just letting all this happen. Who knows what he's up to right now. I'm assuming you're right, that she is going to try to find her kids or recreate them and make sure it sticks this time. But I didn't really know that was what she was doing.
And that's the frustrating part to me, is we get her to the place of, I need to let go of this thing, and based on that ending, she's just gonna try to go find it again, which kind of undoes the progression. And then she'll find White Vision, I'm sure, and it's like it kind of undoes what she was going through at the end of this. Mm-hmm. And like now I'm just kind of like, now they could not do that. They could prove me wrong, but like that's what it looks like it's shaping up to do right now, and that kind of disappoints me.
There's two separate lessons that Wanda, in theory, is supposed to learn by the end. There's the lesson of, I need to let go of my loved ones who have died and move on with my life, which is difficult. There's no arguing that, but I need to do it. And also, I don't need to screw over an entire town so that I can feel better about the bad things that have happened to me. And by the end, I definitely get the feeling that she has learned not to screw over innocent civilians to make herself feel better. But I don't know, like you, I'm not sure if she's fully learned that she needs to, move on and get away from, just let Vision rest in peace. I don't need to try and recreate him or whatever. And a lot of this is going to mess with anyone. If you have kids, even, she had sons for 2 days, right? It wasn't very long. But still, you have memories of having those kids and then they disappear. That's going to mess with you. But the ending where she's saying goodbye to Vision, that does kind of paint the picture that she's ready to try and move on, like you said. And then at the end, it's like, no, just kidding, maybe not. And so like what you were saying, it's kind of got, it's straddling the line a little bit.
Yeah. I will say, though, one thing I liked about that second to last episode where we're kind of jumping around is she does let go of Vision, and she kind of has to come to terms with him being dead, and then in her agony, she creates this pocket reality. She kind of creates her heart's desires without even maybe realizing it. But I like when she's driving through the town, she sees and looks around at all the people who are there, and they all seem miserable and unhappy too. I thought that was just a nice little detail to throw in there. I didn't really have a whole lot to add to it. But I do think, though, in the last episode, the worst scene is where she's just wandering through town and then everybody swarms her and is like, help me, let me go. That felt, I don't know what it was. That's where the show kind of loses what I think is kind of the artful touch that it had sort of had early on, and it's just being super blunt. And we need to have a scene that conveys people, or Wanda has to confront people like who she's been imprisoning. Okay, a bunch of people are going to swarm around her and whatnot, and then in a couple minutes Agatha is going to show up and then they're going to start fighting again. Okay, whatever.
So I had a question about that. I don't know if you never watched Buffy, but the blonde woman who she said, I have a daughter, she can be friends with your sons, or she can be the school bully, whatever. Like, I was confused because at one point in the episode where Sword is investigating this, they said it looks like at the very least she has kept married couples together. She's trying to not disrupt the family dynamics in this town, right? And so like Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, she is married to the guy with the mustache who worked with Vision in the first episode, and like there's presumably those two are married in real life and as well as in the Hex. But then she says, I have a daughter. Can I please hold my daughter? Can I please, like, be with her again? And we haven't seen a daughter up until now. We haven't seen any kids. And so, like, Quicksilver, he says in a Halloween episode, it's kind of, that's good that you didn't include kids in this because, ethically, that's a little shaky. So then my question is, where were the kids? Were they, like, just sleeping for weeks and weeks? I don't know. And the show doesn't know either. And, like, there at the end, she says, I want to hold my daughter. I want to know where she is. Like, is her daughter safe outside of the Hex, or is she in the Hex, but she's not allowed to walk around with the adults because Wanda, just wants the adults to suffer? I really don't know. And, like, furthermore, I felt like some characters were given a little bit of weight in early episodes, and then nothing was done with them. Vision's boss comes and eats dinner with them, and he's married to Kitty Foreman from that 70s show. And then we don't see him again for the rest of the series, I don't think. But we see Kitty Foreman a few more times. We see her in the scene where Wanda's driving through town and everyone looks miserable, and then we see her, like, a few times in these last few episodes. But where's her husband? Like, is she actually married to that guy, or is that something that Wanda just made up for those two, and they're not married? And then, like, in the episode where they're at the swimming pool and they're kind of having the party, and Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer is in charge of that party, I got the feeling this is going to be a really important character here because she's kind of butting heads with Wanda a little bit there, and then nothing. We get, like, nothing else with her until she says, my daughter, I have a daughter. And, like, there was one moment where she said, do these earrings make me look fat? But, like, I was so confused. Like, some characters seem like they're important, and then we never see them again. Some characters, like, the mailman shows up, like, halfway into the series. We never saw him before that. I was confused on some of that.
Yeah, and I think the show does try to get around a lot of that with Wanda being like, I don't know. Because, like, what I was kind of figuring might be happening was that, like, she had, like, made some sort of bargain, maybe not with Mephisto himself, but with a Mephisto-like person who did know all of the goings-on and, like, all the intricacies and was sort of putting a lot of the legwork into, how the Hex was organized and whatnot. Because I felt like that's how you can, like, sort of get away with keeping Wanda maybe a little less villainous, or something. And then so, like, I think the show's trying to absolve itself of, like, trying to get into all of the specifics by just having somehow her subconscious is, like, just constructing all of this, and she doesn't know all the intricacies herself, so we don't either.
And that's one thing that I would like. The show will kind of address it, like, in the Halloween episode, he says, or it's right before the Halloween episode, Vision says, why are there no kids in this town? And then afterwards, suddenly there's kids. Where had they been until now? Like, there's things where it's like, it will sort of do it. And if we had never seen kids at any point, like in the Halloween episode, if the only kids we saw were Billy and Tommy, I don't think I would be questioning that. If Vision hadn't said, where are the other kids in this town, I don't think I would be questioning that. So it's one of those things where, like, because the show flirts with the idea of dealing with these ramifications, but doesn't go all the way with it, that I'm asking these questions in the first place.
Right, right. So I wanted to quickly say another thing. I had mentioned that like I hated all the sword characters. One really stupid thing that happened towards the end that I think is a perfect example of why I don't like sword. So Jimmy Woo is in handcuffs. He is a suspect according to the people of Sword. Then there is a phone ringing on a table, and this handcuffed, suspicious man
Is allowed to walk up to...
conspicuously walks backward towards the table and grabs it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you kidding me? And then he says, I'm going to get my connection from Quantico to be here within the hour. And then Hayward just says, hey, you're bluffing. What? No. Anyways, however, now and then also he has to shoot at a kid because he's a jerk. Anyways, getting rid of all that, I want to give Monica some kudos. I don't like how she's treated in I don't like how she's written or like kind of played in the middle few episodes. However, when she gets her photon powers and all that stuff, I thought she was cool again. And when she was like hanging out with Wanda and like trying to get to know her and like using her powers and just kind of overall being a hero, I liked her. I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought that the little bit in the first post-credit scene of the final episode was a fun little touch where, somebody says, hey, they want to see you in the theater. You get it? Because she's going to be in Captain Marvel 2, which will be a movie. Ooh. There's a funny meme I'm looking at right now where Vision is saying, but what is the ship of Theseus, if not the ship of Theseus persevering?
That's great. That's about all that I have to say about it. Did you have any final thoughts on this season?
I'm sure I do, but I'll try to remember it and maybe post it in the comments. Overall, I want to say I like this show. I'm a little bit more negative on it than I want to be, just at least in this discussion. Maybe that's me wanting to be more agreeable because I don't want to be yelling at you, Comics Kid. I don't want us to hate each other. So
no, I feel like so often you and we talk about movies and stuff, and we are almost always exactly on the same page. And I think at the very least, it makes for a more interesting discussion when we're both kind of on different sides. But even if you said this is the greatest thing the MCU has ever done, and I would not agree with that, I don't think it would come to blows like, all right, put him up, Nielsen, let's fight this out. But yeah.
Well, this is the last discussion we'll ever have. Thank you. Luckily, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is only going to be 6 episodes.
Okay.
It's going to be the same length. I think every episode is going to be between 40 to 50 minutes.
Okay.
So that's what I heard.
We'll probably, if you're up to it, we can do. I kind of like talking about the entire season. If it was longer, I probably wouldn't like that as much because it'd be too much to talk about all at once. But I don't mind if we wanted to do the same thing for Falcon and Winter Soldier, talk about it when it's all done. We could probably do that.
Yeah, I'm totally down to do that.
And in a couple weeks, Kong vs. Godzilla is coming out, and we can probably talk about that. I know you're a big monster fan, and we have talked about we've only talked about what was the other Godzilla movie? Kingdom of Monsters or King of Monsters?
Yes.
Okay. We've talked about that one. We haven't talked about any of the others in this little reboot universe, but we'll probably talk about that when it drops on HBO Max. And that's about it for now.
You're not going to watch the Snyder Cut?
Oh, yeah. When does that come out? Because we talked about that.
10 days, baby.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm going to watch that, too. So I guess that's happening before Kong Skull Island. Well,
yeah. See, no, yeah, because it's Justice League, and then the next day is when Falcon and Winter Soldier start.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess we will be talking about the Snyder Cut. I need to prepare myself mentally for that. And then we'll also be talking about probably Falcon Winter Soldier when it's all done. And then when does the What If show? Is that going to be like after Falcon Winter Soldier, or is that after Loki?
I have no idea. I know that Loki is starting in the summertime, and I have not heard a release date on What If yet. Maybe they've announced it. I have not heard it.
Because What If is probably the one show I'm least interested in. So I don't know if I'll even watch any of that, but all the others I wouldn't mind doing videos on them.
Okay, yeah, right on.
But yeah, that's about all that we have to talk about here. So thank you guys for listening. This has been a little longer than normal, but I am the Comics Kid 2099.
And I am Connor Nielsen.
And we will see you guys in the future. Have a good one.